World of Warcraft. You might have heard of it. I mean, if you haven't, I don't even know what you are. I mean, this game is like a phenomenon, a cultural phenomenon. This game blew my freaking socks off. I'm not even kidding. I still have yet to find the socks that this game blew off because I've been a gamer since I was in diapers. I mean, Mario and Link were my childhood heroes. I learned Reader's composition from Final Fantasy, and I learned what it was to be a man from Solid Snake. But I am going to get this out of the way right now. World of Warcraft is my favorite game of all time. There, I said it. Now, World of Warcraft, WoW as we call it, is known for two major things. One, its massive world, and two, its amazing multiplayer experience. See, before WoW came out, the biggest open world we had seen was probably San Andreas, and our idea of multiplayer was TF2 maybe? Huh? Oh, it wasn't out yet? Okay, sorry, not TF2. Maybe Counter-Strike, Halo 2? And yeah, there were some massive multiplayer games out there, but no one really cared about them. But when Warcraft went from being a fairly successful RTS game to a massively multiplayer online phenomenon success, amazing, blow your mind, freaking it changed everything. So I don't know how it was for the rest of you, but my first time logging in went something like this. Alright, let's make a new character. Oh my god, they have cows. They have zombies? You know what, I'm just gonna make a human because I'm a human. So it makes perfect sense. Whoa! That is one ugly human.
Warning, the following gameplay footage is from World of Warcraft Cataclysm because finding vanilla gameplay is really hard.
And then, we enter the world for the first time. And our minds were immediately blown. And let's face it, we had no idea what we were doing. We're just dropped in this place, and we're looking around like, what's going on? I don't even know. And then we see this guy with an exclamation point above his head, so we go talk to him, and he gave us our first quest, and we're like, whoa! So we go and do what he wanted us to do, which was probably kill something, and we did. And then we leveled up, and then before long, we're getting our second ability, and that's when we're just like, dude, my class, the class that I'm playing, gets new abilities. I want to know what new abilities I get so I can see how powerful I become. So we keep playing and we keep doing quests and we keep leveling up, and before long we're sent to a different area, and that's the second hook. We're like, dude, we can go to new areas? There are new zones? There are different zones? You mean other races start in different areas of the world? Oh my god, this world is humongous. I want to see where else I go. And that's what it was all about. That was the formula that hooked us. We wanted to see how powerful our characters could become, and we wanted to see what else this world had to offer, so we kept playing. And back in those days, it took forever to get anywhere. I mean, leveling took a long time. I think my first character took me a year to get to max level. So we had other races that we could create, and there were other zones that we may have skipped previously. So this content lasted a really long time. But let's face it, content gets old after a while, and sooner or later we get bored. But there was something else about this game that made it stick. The other players. It didn't matter if we wanted to play this game by ourselves, because sooner or later we were forced to team up if we wanted to progress further in the game, and these were usually in raids or late dungeons. And we had to rely on one another, and bonds were built around the common need to achieve common ends, and friendships were formed, and guilds were created. And servers became strong because you wanted to rely on as many people as possible. There were times when you would need at least 39 other people to achieve what you wanted. The success of WoW was built around the social game. It took multiplayer to a whole new level, beyond anything we had ever experienced before and have yet to experience since. And it might sound a little crazy, but as years passed and players continued to invest in their characters and in the friendships they had made, they began to care about this world called Azeroth, and new threats came in the form of new expansions. We found ourselves ready to defend the world against the likes of Illidan, Arthas, and Deathwing, and everything in between. And as the years passed and as the player base grew, we began to see that WoW was more than just a fad and that it was here to stay. We started seeing it in commercials with people like Mr. T and Chuck Norris, and let's not forget everybody's favorite South Park episode. World of Warcraft broke day one sales records with the original game hitting 240,000 copies on the first day. and each consecutive expansion broke those sales records. Burning Crusade sold 2.4 million copies, Wrath of the Lich King sold 2.8 million copies, and Cataclysm sold 3.3 million copies. Mist of Pandaria sold 2.7 million copies, which didn't break any sales records, but it's still nothing to sneeze at. And beyond that, World of Warcraft subscriber numbers had climbed to an unprecedented 8 million just before the release of its first expansion, the Burning Crusade. And by the beginning of Cataclysm, it had reached an unprecedented 12 million subscribers. And then, World of Warcraft experienced its first major drop-off. It's kind of ironic that an expansion called Cataclysm would see such a cataclysmic drop-off. By the end of WoW's third expansion, the subscribers were down to a lowly 9 million. And I know, 9 million is still a lot. But 3 million is a lot too. I mean, they lost a quarter of their subscriber numbers, okay? A quarter is a lot. If you ordered a pizza and a quarter of it was missing, you would think that was a lot. If gas prices dropped by a quarter, you would think that was a lot. If you were hit and your HP dropped by a quarter, you would think that was a lot. And let's not forget that upon the release of WoW's fourth expansion, Mists of Pandaria, the subscriber numbers jumped to a steady 10 million. So no, I'm not preaching gloom and doom, and yes, WoW is still a huge online sensation. Besides, there are going to be people that just get tired of playing the game. I mean, it is like 100 years old? And maybe there are just some people that don't want to pay $15 anymore. They'd rather have a pizza instead. Then again, Warcraft has been through a lot of changes over the years, and I mean, they've added some pretty cool things. They've added glyphs, they've added achievements, they've added new races, new classes, and they've added in pet battles. Blizzard is an awesome company, and they've given us some amazing games, not just Warcraft, but they've also given us StarCraft and Diablo. Oh, never mind. Well, they've most certainly done an amazing job with Warcraft. I mean, it's never been a perfect game, let's be honest. But it's always been fun, and it's always had something to offer. And the game is always being updated with new content and new features. But if I'm going to be honest, I don't think all these features are truly great. In fact, I think some of them have made the game less awesome. Do you ever wonder what the game would have been like if flying mounts were never introduced? And don't get me wrong, I love my flying mounts, and I remember working really hard to get them. And I don't know what I would do without them now, but at the same time, I kind of get tired of looking at the sky. I mean, it seems like you spend more time flying over the world than doing anything in it. And remember earlier how I was singing praises about this vast open world? Well, it's not so vast and open when you're looking down on it. Flying mounts aren't bad really, they're actually quite awesome. But they do take away a little something from the world, and I suppose you could just not use them, but that would go against gamer instinct, so no. Fortunately, you'll have to level for a long time before you get a flying mount. Well, at least you used to, but then they changed that as well. You see, in Cataclysm, they made some vast changes to the world, not only in appearance, but in how questing works. You remember before how I said it took me about a year to level up my first character? Well, I have a cousin who started playing the game after Cataclysm, and it took him 3 weeks to hit max level. 3 weeks! And that was with a girlfriend and a full-time job. You see, originally, the game was built almost entirely around leveling. I mean, people were scattered abroad, doing all kinds of different things. But each expansion added new zones and a raised level cap, and naturally, the game began to shift focus on the new content. And so, leveling started to become more tedious as the level cap increased. And over time, leveling was sped up. I mean, after a while, you were like Speedy Gonzales through those zones, which felt great at first until Cataclysm came. And the whole point of Cataclysm was the changing world. New quests were added, and the zones were changed, and the stories were updated. But by the time you started to sink your teeth into a new zone, you were moving on to the next one because you were too high level. Leveling just feels rushed now, even to new players. And I mean, if you're just gonna rush through it, what's the point? I guess the best thing you can hope for is that the in-game content is awesome. When you hit max level, you have the same thing that you've always had. You've got heroic dungeons and raids and all sorts of things to do. But it's still a very different experience from what it used to be. The endgame of WoW has always been built around the idea of teaming up with other players to defeat the bosses, to get the gear, and everybody's happy. Now back in the day, if you already had a group of buddies, you were set. But if not, you had to look for some, and sometimes this kinda sucked. Because not only did you have to find people that played the same time as you, you also had to find people that you liked. And that's not always easy on the internet. And hey, I've done it. Heck, I've made some real life friends, I mean true friends, through World of Warcraft. And I'm not the only one. There are tales of marriages happening through World of Warcraft. And I think that's awesome. But around the end of the Wrath of the Lich King expansion, Blizzard introduced a new system called LFG, or Looking for Group. You see, believe it or not, some people just don't know how to make friends, and you can imagine how hard it was for them to get into dungeons. So they added in LFG. It was designed to make dungeons more accessible, and so players could queue up for a random dungeon from anywhere in the world and group up with 4 random strangers to complete the dungeon with. Not only did you no longer have to run to the dungeon entrances, you didn't have to look for people to do the dungeons with. Now, was this a good thing? Well, would you rather run the dungeon with 4 people that you had to work hard to find but are pretty cool, or would you rather run it with 4 random jackasses? Have you heard of LFG Bingo? It's a game you play where the bingo cards are based on the different types of jerks you come across in LFG. And you can opt out of LFG and you can still group up with people. But you won't get the bonuses for random dungeons. And also, random dungeons don't require you to run to the zone. So instead of running to the dungeon instance, you just randomly get teleported there through a menu. And that's no fun. You see, most people just use the LFG tool because it's convenient, but since you're not sharing the experience with friends and having fun, the whole repetitive dungeon running becomes a lot more monotonous. Well, at least we still have to group up for raids. Oh, you've gotta be kidding me! Do you guys remember Ulduar? Ulduar was like the best raid ever, and I know some of you are going to argue that Karazhan was the best raid ever. Karazhan was awesome, but no. Ulduar was the best. Deal with it. Remember how awesome Ulduar was? Remember the first fight with the Flame Leviathan dude? Like, just vehicle combat was amazing. And then you could choose. Remember, you could go fight the Razor Dragon thing? Or you could go fight the Flame Fire guy? That was cool. And then after you did that, you fought the robot guy, the annoying XT dude. And then it opened up even more and you could go choose who you wanted to fight next. So if you were struggling with one boss, you could just go take on a different one and then get back to the other one. Or you could just skip all that and go on to the last guy, who was even harder. Oh, it was amazing. But what really stood out in Ulduar was how well designed the boss mechanics were. I mean, you had your normal fight and then you had hard mode. And the way to unlock hard mode was always different in each boss. You remember XT, whenever his heart would drop down, and for like the longest time your raid leader was like, now don't DPS down that heart too much, we don't want to unlock hard mode, and we're like, oh man. And then one day he finally said, guys, we're ready. DPS down that heart, and you're like, dude, oh my god! And we started just going nuts on that heart, and we unlocked hard mode, and he just wiped us all out. And remember Memoron? And he had that button you had to press to unlock hard mode, and then it just went all fiery and crazy, and just, oh my goodness. And like the whole raid was designed around these different mechanics to unlock hard mode, and it was awesome. And then they did something really stupid, and it's the reason why we're never going to see a raid like Ulduar again. They did away with this idea of unlocking raid encounters around hard mode, and they just put it in a menu. And now you just select normal mode or heroic mode, and the raid adjusts to your selection. There is nothing more disappointing and disheartening than losing gameplay to a menu option. And it's not the only time this has happened. Remember LFG, how you don't have to go to the entrance of a dungeon and you can just randomly port there through the menu? They did the same thing with Battlegrounds with random BGs. You can just randomly port into a battleground as opposed to running to the battleground master and doing it there. Even most recently, they've taken the rep system, and it wasn't much, but you put a tabard on, and then you went into random dungeons, and you would get rep based on what tabard you're wearing. In 5.2, they're adding a feature where you just, in a menu, choose which rep you want to get for the first dungeon, and you get a bunch of rep upon completion. Why not add a quest option where you go to one of the rep guys, and you get a quest, and then you go do the dungeon for the quest? That would, make more sense. But no, we're going to get menu options. Menu options suck. They're not gameplay. They're not adding anything to the game. They're just menus. Blizzard has said that they're going to try to get more patches and more expansions out quicker. But if this means that I have to see more menus instead of gameplay, then by all means take all the time you need. I'm sure you're all familiar with Shigeru Miyamoto's famous quote, "A delayed game is eventually good, but a rushed game is forever bad." So Blizzard, please don't hate me. I love you. Your game is awesome. I pet battle, I'm running around on my monk kicking butt, and I'm raiding, and I'm doing dailies. But it just doesn't feel as enriched with depth and social interaction like it used to. I mean, those are the things that make the game great. And I know we tend to complain a lot and we say we want things now, but we really don't. It's like a great man once said, players tend to lobby for convenience, but then complain that there's nothing to do. And it's nice to not have to run back to town to get a new skill or have to run so far to the nearest mailbox. But streamlining the game through light speed leveling and menu options only seems to remove gameplay. The bottom line is, World of Warcraft is the greatest massively multiplayer online role-playing game of all time. And it is built around its massive world and its amazing social multiplayer. But if you take those two things away, it's just an online role-playing game. And that's not all that special.